Αγαπητές και αγαπητοί, ξεκινάμε την τελευταία συνεδρία του συνεδρίου μας, του φετινού μας συνεδρίου, και έχω την πολύ μεγάλη χαρά να προεδρεύω σε μία συνεδρία με 4 αγαπητούς φίλους και συναδέλφους στον χώρο της Καινής Διαθήκης και της Βιβλικής ερμηνείας. Για να μην κλέβω από τον πολύτιμο χρόνο των εισηγήσεων και της συζήτησης, ξεκινώ αμέσως, παρουσιάζοντας την πρώτη μας ομιλήτρια. Πρόκειται για την καθηγήτρια κυρία Jorunn Økland του Πανεπιστημίου του Όσλο. Για όσους ασχολούνται με την Καινή Διαθήκη και ειδικότερα με το χώρο της φεμινιστικής θεολογίας και επίσης και την ερμηνεία και τις συζητήσεις για το φύλο. Νομίζω η κυρία Økland είναι εξαιρετικά γνωστή, είναι πολυγραφότατη, με διεθνή παρουσία. Όπως της λέω, θα έχει γίνει σχεδόν Ελληνίδα. You're almost Greek now, yes. Διότι εδώ και λίγο καιρό είναι η διευθύντρια του Νορβηγικού Αρχαιολογικού Ινστιτούτου των Αθηνών, το οποίο όντως το διευθύνει με πολύ μεγάλη επιτυχία, έχει κιόλας διοργανώσει ένα σωρό εξαιρετικά συνέδρια, τόσο από το χώρο της αρχαίας ιστορίας και αρχαιολογίας, όσο και στο δικό μας το χώρο της βιβλικής ερμηνείας. Σήμερα την καλέσαμε να μας μιλήσει, να μας δώσει και αυτή τη σκέψη της πάνω στο θέμα της μεταρρύθμισης και τον τρόπο που ο Λούθυρος διάβασε και η Λουθερανική παράδοση διάβασε τη βίβλο, και θα παρουσιάσει ένα πολύ ενδιαφέρον θέμα για τη μέθοδο του Λουθύρου και τις θέσεις του όσον αφορά την αγαμία.
Thank you very much for inviting me here. I will speak in English, but the PowerPoint will be in Greek. And thank you for the help with translating that. I will start by addressing some issues as Ekaterini indicated, with gender in the Lutheran tradition and the place of women. And then I will move on to take you all into a study of 1 Corinthians 7 and the method that Luther is applying there to raise questions about the celibacy of priests and the whole idea that celibacy should be a higher and more elevated state than married life. So this paper is, of course, colored by the fact that I myself belong to a Lutheran church. This, on the one hand, allows me to be stark in my criticism of it, of mistakes, shortcomings, problems, and inconsistencies within this tradition. But I also notice what it has pioneered and some of the female agency it has, in my opinion, given room for. And for this reason, I would like to dedicate this talk to Kari Weiteberg, who will tomorrow be installed as the first female bishop of Oslo, which brings the gender balance in the group of Norwegian Lutheran bishops up to a 50-50 exactly, and then with already a female overbishop over all of them. So, yes, so we are looking forward to tomorrow. I will start by addressing a very core issue in the Lutheran tradition, namely the principle of Sola Scriptura. And I think that with this, it will also frame in and tie better in with Professor Karakoulis' paper later on. Sola Scriptura, a slogan credited to the 16th century reformer Martin Luther, expresses the special status of the Bible as a source of divine revelation in Protestant Christianity. But with the accumulated historical and hermeneutical knowledge we possess today, the notion of Scripture alone is an impossibility. we understand it to be an impossibility, although it was historically an important slogan. If we approach this ideal principle as hermeneutically impossible, we can better understand why various Protestant denominations have chosen such diverse emphasis or aspects in their amplification of this principle. In spite of the variations, the sola scriptura principle means that in Protestant traditions, compared to Catholic and more Eastern Christian traditions, the Bible is not only seen in greater isolation from tradition, but also reckoned with higher esteem, relatively speaking, given the absence of other sources of competing authority. Because of the unique authority given to the Bible, it was also within the Protestant traditions that the need for a more systematic, historical, critical, biblical scholarship arose for the first time during the Enlightenment period. A reconsideration of the Bible, now as a collection of books from different historical periods with inherent ethical, theological, or historical claims that could not always easily be aligned, led to this historical, critical questioning of the Bible, especially from the 18th century onwards. If only Scripture is to be authoritative, what if the current understandings of the Bible's content, message, and ethics given in Protestant dogmas and church hierarchies are built on false premises? This became a very, very acute question during the Enlightenment. The development that followed to explore the Bible with critical tools and methods in a historical way as a result of cultures, societies, and power struggles of the past was, in my view, fueled or driven by this special importance given to the Bible. Preference was given to historical research into primitive Christianity, driven by the notion that whatever a New Testament text would have meant in its original context, that would be the objective and definitive meaning of the text also today, i.e. during the Enlightenment. From there on, many would argue that this meaning was also normative for believers today. Hence the need also for the Church to know and embrace this kind of historical research. But there was, in principle, no problem for this type of Protestantism to break with traditional understandings of biblical passages if a particular tradition of interpretation could be proven to be wrong. The irony, again, is that for a long time, the tools, methods, and insights of historical research were looked upon with suspicion by the Protestant churches themselves. So it's kind of so in a way I'm saying that the historical criticism that arose is the illegitimate child of Protestantism that Protestant churches would never acknowledge until it was almost too late. In any case, the historical critical approach has provided critics and dissidents from all faiths and confessions with an invaluable toolbox, language, and further fuel for liberation struggles of various kinds. Today, in light of the vast advances in a more epistemologically based hermeneutics, even most Protestant theologians will acknowledge that religious and cultural traditions inevitably color our interpretations of Scripture. This makes it much more urgent to research also the traditions and mechanisms that have brought us the Bible in its current material and canonical forms, which we are much closer to here in Greece than up in the north, and the filters we have been taught to use to appropriate it. If we approach the ideal sola scriptura principle as hermeneutically impossible, we'll skip this. So for Protestants, the consequence of this principle in practice is that their position is totally dependent on what the Bible at every time is taken to say. Whenever the Bible has been seen to presuppose that, for example, women are secondary in every way to men, then Protestant Christian women have had to see themselves as such. This means, as we shall see, on the one hand, that discussions of celibacy and marriage and other gender-related topics very easily turn into exegetical discussions of particular biblical texts. On the other hand, it means that when the Bible is suddenly seen to be silent on topics as we today understand them, then a 1500 to 1800 year-long tradition of celibacy, male priests, etc., is in itself no argument. If it can be shown that women, according to the Bible, were created in God's image as equally valuable and responsible, and are represented by Paul as performing cultic functions, such as preaching, praying, and prophesying, then there is no reason why women today should not have access to the offices where such cultic functions are institutionalized, even though if through most of the church history they have not had such access. So this is what the Sola Scriptura principle means. New interpretation of the Bible means you can break with tradition. So if it is no problem for many Protestant churches to break with tradition if the tradition can be proven either to be wrong or wrong today and based on a wrong reading of the Bible. At this point, we need to distinguish between a descriptive ethic use of the term tradition, which you also find in the Protestant traditions, and the normative use of the same term, that whatever the tradition has said or what has happened in tradition is normative and right. So for Lutherans, the first descriptive use is unproblematic, the second is impossible. Therefore, there is a lot of stake over biblical interpretation. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, at the end of the 19th century, held that all religions degrade women, but the worst enemies of women are found in the Protestant churches, where the leaders use the Bible to silence them. This is an important observation. The same Pauline letters were used as arguments on both sides of debates over women's roles within Protestant Christianity hundreds and years ago, and maybe some places even today. There were no women priests in the mainstream Protestant churches until the 20th century. This is why I see feminist biblical exegesis as such an important part of the Protestant tradition, because it has proven to be a powerful tool for change. Okay, at this point, we will move on to the medieval period. Before Luther, there was Erasmus, who was a figure of transition. Personally, I find Erasmus in many ways as interesting as Luther, but I will not go into that today, because we are celebrating the anniversary of Luther. Erasmus reads 1 Corinthians 7 as a series of directives about full legal marriage, mixed marriage, divorce, and single states, such as widowhood and virginity. For him, the point of the chapter is that the outward condition of one's life ought not to be changed because one has become a Christian. He reads the chapter to urge celibacy and continence, but not in such a strong way that the remedy of marriage cannot be recommended to those who need it. And I mention Erasmus also to make clear to you that Luther's translation of the Bible into German was not the first translation, although it became very important. There were 22 printed full Bible translations into German or Low German appearing before Luther's. However, the existence of such translations did not guarantee that such Bible translations were taken seriously. Luther himself claimed polemically that the Bible had been entirely unknown and unavailable when he was a young man. So this also demonstrates that it is not enough to just translate the Bible. It has to be followed up by a larger program, and in a way a political or theological program. So this is part of the method. So first, there is the emphasis on translation. Today it is difficult for us to understand how the Bible could function in a culture where most people did not even have access, if they wanted, to read it. Yesterday, the issue was raised whether people in Anglican or other traditions actually read the Bible. I think this is the problem also across Protestantism. Protestants elevate the Bible, but most people don't read it. So it is fetishized also there. But at least it is available to those who are interested, since it is translated. Because the Latin in the West, you know, the Lutheran areas were Catholic before they became Lutheran, so this is why I relate to the Latin Vulgate here, which made the Bible the priest's reserve. So to translate it was to make it more broadly available. Luther's idea of the priesthood of all believers also meant that the text should be available in every person's hands to check for themselves. Here is the front page of the edition that I will use. It is a very interesting picture that we could be discussing, but I will skip that now. So his first translation of the New Testament was in 1522, but the one I will be using is the last hand from 1545 to 6. This is in itself an important document for the development of Frühneuhochdeutsch, which is like a standardization of German language at the time, very much the same way as the King James Bible had in the English-speaking realm in the following century. But in my discussion of the passages, I shall be using this edition of his commentary to the Corinthian letters. Well, this doesn't work so in Greek. It's just yes, translation into Greek. But I had a point here about how he had translated this particular passage into German, and just to show you some examples. But yeah, I'll skip that. Here it is shown that. The German, his German translation, es ist besser freien, so to propose, to get married, than Brunst leiden, which catches the Greek very well. Pirustai in ancient Greek, kais, and then Brunst is also related to the word burn. You can maybe hear the similarity even in the English. So it is so his translation is a very literal translation, I would say. And this is part of his method to make a translation and make it as literal as possible from the sources he had available. Oops. Okay. So he says that he would like that I had the quote here from 1 Corinthians, how he translates the important verses 7 and 8, which are the central in his commentary on 1 Corinthians 7. So he focuses mostly on 1 Corinthians 7 and 8, that where Paul says, I would like all people to be, I would have liked that all people were like me, but everyone has their own gift from God, one like this and another one like that. And I say, especially to the unmarried and the widows, it is good for you if you remain like that. But if you cannot abstain, it is better to propose and get married, and that is better than to suffer brunst, as we just saw. Here, we see an interpretation of 1 Corinthians or verses 1 to 2. And here he starts with his polemic against celibacy. Blinde, elende Leute haben gemeint, dass man könne die Keuschheit von auswendig die Menschen bringen. So blind and poor people have, or not poor, but blind and low people have meant that you could impose chastity on people from the outside. Although it is a gift from heaven, and it has to be from the heart, because otherwise it can lead to fall into fire, into the
Fire.
No, I've forgotten the term in English, but anyway, to hell and yeah. And so that he here reads Paul to say that that it has to be in from the heart and full of air and love to women, and otherwise, if it comes from the outside, it is not like authentic. It can look nice to the world, but it's not like for real. So it requires a free spirit, einen freien Geist, and it must be grasped by a free spirit, because otherwise it becomes a dead letter and an anxious law. So I say, and then the chastity gets lost. And then to argue this, it is interesting again with his method that he argues in a very, for us scholars today, an unconventional way, because he quotes popular sayings. Nach nimmt ein Weib, so hat deine Freunde ein Ende. So, which is probably just a colloquial saying at the time. So, and then, which is the first quote here, and the second one, Hochzeit ist eine kurze Freude und lange Unluft. And then he adds that, and whatever else sayings and colloquialisms that are said about the state of marriage. So he, and this is not the only place he does this. He often refers to, ways of speaking. So this also shows that he intended more people than just the very learned people to read, or that they should be able to connect their academic discourse with their daily speech. No. Okay. And then here he quotes verse 5. And then he makes the comment that this shows how bad faith St. Paul has in chastity. So that chastity, if you decide to live in celibacy, it gives room for the devil, because the flesh becomes weaker. And so whereas the two who are married, they want so much to be together that even to go to be apart and find time for prayer is difficult. He continues here that although he has this idea of marriage as good, and that every person should be able to read the Bible, he also emphasizes in this same interpretation that for God all things are like, alle Dinge gleich, although they in between themselves are ungleich, they are not equal. So that in this way, man can be over woman in marriage, but they are equal to God, which again picks up something Paul says elsewhere. But he also says here that also gilt auch für ihm Ehe und Jungfrauschaft gleich. So that to be a virgin and to be married is the same thing for God. For both are gifts, beides ist eine göttliche Gabe. Both are gifts from God. And also, you know, that one is still better than the other when you hold them together. So, I mean, he really thinks that marriage is the best, but this is so. But then he goes on to argue that he's made his point. So say now he goes against how nuns first are being fooled when their situation is presented as better than being married, and also he thinks that this is used in preaching for women in general, that it is better to become a nun than to get married, and Luther strongly disagrees with this. And this is because he has a notion of marriage that it is good also. It's according to human nature. And that it can improve people to be married. So the way he describes marriage here in this text is very much built on Catholic teaching on marriage. Still, he describes it in a way where he just falls one term short of calling it a sacrament. Yeah, but then still he argues against the Catholic teaching on celibacy, which I guess I have to start. Yeah. So I will skip much of this. But then his conclusion in a later, not from 1968, but that was another edition. That when his conclusion for himself is that when you as a spouse, as a male, a married man, lives the right way, you live the right way, you are doing better than when you are doing a pilgrimage 100 miles, and I did not know that before. I chose this example of 1 Corinthians 7 because it is one of the areas where Lutheran exegesis made a very, very big difference. As you know, in the Lutheran tradition, you had married priests, married male priests first, and then you had the situation where monks married nuns, like Luther himself did. And when the institution of monasteries then disappeared in the Lutheran tradition, you had the new institutions of the priestly home growing, which became very much centers for spiritual reading, culture, etc. Not as large, of course, as the monasteries had been before, but something along the same lines. And this was, we could see it very clearly here in Luther's understanding of 1 Corinthians chapter 7. And this also illustrates his method because he uses the Sola Scriptura principle as a crowbar. I wondered if that is lostos in, well, it says explained, yeah. Against the Catholic Church hierarchy and authority in general, because if you undermine celibacy, so much else will fall. And then there are also other problems with the Lutheran idea of sola scriptura, because what it has led to is that one thinks that one leads the Bible as it is, but that is never possible. So one kind of, the tradition still enters through the back door, which I think we are only coming to terms with now in our days. But one of the unintended effects of this revolution in kind of lifestyle, marriage or celibacy, is that in Protestant churches after the Reformation, there was no longer a legitimate alternative career path for women, apart from getting married, from being a good wife and mother. In the Catholic churches, monasteries for women continued to represent an alternative lifestyle for women, and some of them continued to be important centers for learning. And there was nothing like that for women in the Protestant tradition. I will just sum up that marriage was at the heart of Martin Luther's break with Rome and the Reformation that followed. He continued to attack the celibate life of Catholic clergy and nuns to celebrate marriage as a godly estate throughout his career. He praised marriage and family life and commented on its burdensome side, moving from theoretical speculations while he was a celibate monk to reflecting on his own experiences. His words were direct and blunt, even in formal treatises. Sexual desire was inescapable for all but a handful, he argued, so should be channeled into marriage. He agreed with St. Augustine on the three purposes of marriage in the same order of importance: the procreation of children, the avoidance of sin, and mutual help and companionship. And he praised spousal love. Thank you. Thank you.
Ευχαριστούμε πολύ την κυρία Økland για την παρουσίαση. Είχαμε την ευκαιρία να δούμε πώς δοκιμάστηκε η αρχή της Sola Scriptura πάνω σε ένα πολύ συγκεκριμένο θέμα και μάλιστα υπό το φως της φεμινιστικής και όλας προσέγγισης. Για λόγους οικονομίας χρόνου θα αφήσουμε στο τέλος όλες τις ερωτήσεις, οπότε κρατήστε, σημειώστε τις ερωτήσεις που έχετε για να έχουμε λίγο μεγαλύτερη άνεση.